People pray. They read what's happening and they pray the prayers. So that God gets this wave of prayers around Thursday lunchtime, because 12 is obviously at different times around the world, for the Palestinian people. And if you would like to receive it, there's some sign-up sheets on the back left-hand table and some samples. But just to give you one short example, this was from this week's, and the information says, last week Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip killed Hossam Shabbat, a beloved journalist who tirelessly documented the horrors in northern Gaza for 18 months. After his death, his colleagues shared his final message. If you're reading this, it means I have been killed, most likely targeted by the Israeli occupation forces. When this all began, I was only 21 years old, a college student with dreams like anyone else. By God, I fulfilled my duty as a journalist, and I ask you now, do not stop speaking about Gaza. Do not let the world look away. Keep fighting, keep telling our stories until Palestine is free. And the prayers, God of truth, we lift up Hossam Shabbat, who gave his life at 23 years old to bear witness and serve his people. We grieve the brutality that took him and the relentless violence that has turned Gaza into a graveyard of people and dreams. Bring healing to his family and grant strength to those who remain. Holy Spirit, in our grief, help us be faithful to Hossam's call until our voices shake the very foundations of power. And there are many prayers like that. You don't have to be a Christian to pray to whatever God you support. This just gives an outline and a sense of what we feel is important to what is happening to our brothers and sisters in Palestine and across the world. So that being said, if you want to sign up for it, fill your email address in and I'll make sure you get it every week. You can unsubscribe anytime. Thank you for listening to me, and now for the real reason that you're all here, over to Ahmed, our moderator.
Thanks, Mark. Salamat everyone. My name is Ahmed. I am Palestinian from Gaza. I'd like to welcome you here today, and I would like to express my delight and honor to be the host of today's panel with three of the most relentless and brightest figures in the Palestine solidarity movement. But before we start, I must acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, acknowledging that this land was never ceded, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Also acknowledging that we are meeting today on a ground zero of a genocide that occurred more than 230 years ago, and its echoes still reverberate to our day. The horrors unfolding back home in Gaza, and everywhere in Gaza, in the West Bank, is unspeakable. And I would make an introduction and speak about it, but I won't because I am running out of words. But as we begin our session today, I would like to ask everyone to take a minute's silence to remember those who have sacrificed, who have given their lives, the victims of the modern era Holocaust in Gaza right now. Remember them in that minute. Remember Reem, Ruh al-Ruh. Remember Hossam Shabbat. Remember them all. So let's take 1 minute silence. Thank you. Who owns the homeland? apologize, I usually call it homeland because it's so happened that my homeland is holy. But unfortunately, it's a blessing for the obvious reasons, and it's also a curse, unfortunately, because it made it a place for all the vulturous imperial colonial powers around the world. But enough about what I think. So who owns the Holy Land? In what now is southern Spain, now called Andalusia, people of the three monotheistic faiths, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, lived in relative harmony during the Muslim rule for hundreds of years, until the Christian Reconquista expelled the Jews and Muslims at the turn of the 15th century. One can argue that the entirety of the Arab world also enjoyed that kind of harmony and living together. That period has been retrospectively described as convivencia, Spanish for coexistence and harmony. Today's conversation will help us address the two questions that I bet are on the minds of everyone right here today. Namely, is the current conflict in the Holy Land, and I'd hate to use the word conflict, but that's the mainstream word, is it religious? And the second question, can we and how do we bring back convivencia? In an attempt to answer this question, we will draw on the knowledge, perspectives, and personal lived experiences of three incredible figures in our community who happen to belong to the three monotheistic religions: a Palestinian Christian, a Palestinian Muslim, and an Israeli Jew. I'm delighted today to be in conversation with Reem Burrows, Yusuf Rimawi, and Nakhshon Amir. First, I'd like to introduce Reem. Born in Haifa and emigrating in Australia at 14, Reem Burrows is a Palestinian Australian, an accomplished author, speaker, coach, leadership consultant, and executive coach, and a passionate advocate for justice and human rights. With over 25 years of executive leadership experience in sales, marketing, and in training, she was named Australia's best corporate trainer in 2020 and is recognized for helping individuals and organizations drive meaningful transformation. As the founder of Dream Coaching and Consulting, Reem specializes in strategy, leadership, development, emotional intelligence, resilience, and conflict resolution, working with corporations and community organizations across Australia and internationally. She also serves on the board of Palestine Australia Relief and Action, PARA, supporting newly arrived Palestinians from Gaza and advocating for their rights and dignity. Reem is deeply involved in joint Palestinian and Jewish initiatives, challenging propaganda and advocating for a just and peaceful future. As a Palestinian Christian from the 1948 territories, her voice is vital in countering false narratives and reclaiming Palestinian history. In 2024, she published From the River to the Sea, Humanizing Freedom, a book she began writing 2 years before the genocide in Gaza began, offering a powerful perspective on identity, resistance, and justice. Reem believes storytelling through writing, speaking, and leadership is a powerful tool for awakening consciousness and driving change. Whether in boardrooms, community spaces, or global discussions on Palestine, she is committed to amplifying unheard voices and driving real lasting impact. Please join me in welcoming Reen Burrows. Next, I'd like to introduce Nachshon Amir. Nachshon is an anti-Zionist Jew, born and raised in a religious, nationalist Zionist family in what is referred to as Israel, who has been an active member of Free Palestine Melbourne for the past 4 years. Nachshon is also a former Israeli army combat officer who often is upset that he has to be introduced as such. Please join me in welcoming Nachshon. Last but absolutely not least, I'd like to introduce Yusuf al-Rimawi. Yusuf al-Rimawi is a multidisciplined intellectual. Despite his mobility disability, Yusuf has excelled in several domains. Besides lecturing in Arabic and being a translator and editor, he also is a musician, political analyst, and a writer. He founded and led many grassroots initiatives that have made a significant impact on Australian society. These include Palestine Remembered program on Radio 3CR, the Aspire Refugee Project, Tarab Ensemble, and Averos Center of Arab Culture. Since March last year, Yusuf has given 24 lectures on the Palestinian history and culture as part of his Understanding Palestine series. In recognition of his award, Yusuf has won numerous awards, including the Eureka Australia Medal in 2017 and the Palestinian of the Year in 2021, which is an international award endorsed by the Palestinian Ministry of Culture. Last week, Yusuf was nominated to receive the Ambassador for Peace Award from the Universal Peace Federation of Australia, and he just received the news that he has won that award. Please put your hands together to welcome Yusuf. Now, also a bit of a housekeeping, so we're going to go through some questions and a conversation with the panelists, and then we can open it up to the Q&A, so hopefully everyone will get your questions ready, and we'll kick off in a second as I sit down. As I mentioned, the two most important questions that on everyone's minds today is this a religious issue? And can we bring back convivencia? Yusuf, I want to start with you. You've been busy, progressing this educational program and, that seeks to educate the public about the culture and the history of Palestine. So I'd like you to tackle this big question. Who bears the ownership of the homeland? And I know this might be a massive question, but if you could give us a brief answer, a gist of what we could have an insight into how to answer this question. Who owns the Holy Land?
Who owns the Holy Land?
We're gonna activate it, so it's
on off. 1, 2. Who owns the Holy Land are those who are holy. Those who take the pillars of ownership and holiness of the Holy Land. And these two pillars are tolerance and openness. but also those who continuously inhabited the land. 4,500 years ago, the Jabusians, Al-Yabusiyun, an offshoot from a Semitic Canaanite Arabs, migrated in big numbers to lower and upper Levantine, today's Palestine. They built its towns and cities and gave them names. They advanced the civilization just like the Persians, the Mesopotamians, the Pharaohs, and other civilizations in the region. They traded in a currency called the shekel. It's a Canaanite currency. Jerusalem was 7 centuries old when Abraham, the father of the 3 monotheist religion, came. He was welcomed by the Canaanite king, Melchizedek, who, despite the general paganistic religion in the Canaanite land, he had some sort of monotheistic belief. So he believed in Abraham, and he gave him the blessing, and he gave him bread and wine. There is a portrait by Juan Antonio that depicts when Abraham arrived to Jerusalem, depicts the meeting of Melchizedek, the Canaanite king, and Ibrahim. 9 centuries after that, King David defeated Goliath and established the first kingdom for the Hebrews in parts of Palestine. But I want to take you to the 7th century, the time of the arrival of Muslims and Islam to Palestine. There was a treaty, an agreement by the Christian patriarch, Sophronius, and the second Khalifa in Islam, Umar ibn al-Khattab. In this agreement, Umar ibn al-Khattab gave the local people of Jerusalem, the Christians, the freedom to worship, freedom to ownership, and also protection of their homes and properties and churches. A year after that, Umar ibn al-Khattab lifted the ban on Jews to enter Al-Quds. In 1099, the European Crusaders entered the region and destroyed Jerusalem. Something between 40 to 75,000 people were slaughtered over two days, slaughtered to death. One of the local historians who documented this, his name is William Assuri, heard the news of the massacre from his father who witnessed it and wrote about it. And he said that the most horrifying things was not the dead body of the victims, but the faces of the murderers. It was more horrifying. In 1187, the Muslim leader Salahuddin al-Ayyubi defeated the Crusaders and liberated Al-Quds without revenge. And again, Muslim rulers lifted the ban on Jews living in Al-Quds. Within the 2000 record of Al-Quds, of the Holy Land, you will see several civilizations who lived and inhabited, not just us, the Canaanite Arabs. Mostly, they were tolerant and kept the openness, with 2 exceptions, the European Crusaders and the Zionists. And then comes the question, is the conflict inevitable by definition, that the conflict is between Arabs and Jews? Is it inevitable? And let me give you 2 examples. of recent contemporary history. In the 18th and 19th century, one of the most documented genocides in modern history is the genocide of Ash-Sharkas, the Circassians, at the hands of the Russian Tsar, which resulted in the exodus of and the killing of 1.5 million Circassians. The survivors fled to the Ottoman Empire and partly to Arab cities like Damascus, Al-Quds, Cairo, and Jordan. And they were welcomed by the locals, and they were protected, and they assimilated, and they lived like us, and they added to our culture. And if you want to see a manifestation of that, Google the bodyguards of the King of Jordan, and you will see that the bodyguards of King Abdullah and his father King Hussein and his grandfather King Talal and his great-grandfather King Abdullah I were the Circassians, and they were allowed to dress in their traditional costumes until today, the bodyguards of the king. In Jordan, there is a Jil club where they share the beauty of Ash-Sharkas culture, the dancing, magnificent level of arts, the language, and they assimilated and they became Palestinians and Jordanians. And if you think the assimilation was possible because the mainstream population is Muslim and the Circassians were Muslim, let me tell you about another group, non-Muslim group that came pretty much in the same time, a non-Muslim group this time, and it's the Armenians. The Armenians came to Palestine and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Egypt after the genocide of 1915 onwards. And they knocked on the door, and they received protection, and they lived with us, and they added beauty and arts and handcrafts to our land, to our people. And they became Armenian Palestinians, Armenian Syrians. In my music band, we have two magnificent musicians, Syrians of Armenian origin, who play classical Arabic music. And allow me to just give one example. I know I may be...
No, take your time.
In year 2000, during the Camp David negotiations between Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak and Bill Clinton, Al-Quds was the deal maker or breaker. And then came Clinton parameter, which is what's Jewish in the city goes to Israel. What's Arab goes to the Palestinian state. And then came the Armenian quarter, the Armenian neighborhood of Al-Quds. So the Israelis said, that's not Arab, so we will take it. And then Yasser Arafat says to Bill Clinton, said, excuse me, Mr. President, you don't know my real name? And he said, what is your real name, Mr. Chairman Arafat? He said, my name is Yasser Arafatian, to make his name Armenian sounding, like the Armenian families. I am as Armenian as these people. So back to the question, is the conflict inevitable? No. Had the European Jews sought protection and knocked on the door, they would have been welcome and protected, and they would have added to our culture and arts and legality and medicine, and they would have made Palestine even more beautiful and more holy. But instead, the Zionists chose Jewish supremacy and genocide and violence. So who owns the Holy Land? Those who lived continuously on the land, and those who kept it open and maintained the tolerance. Shukran.
I do want to follow up on that thread, Yusuf. I mean, you were born to a refugee family. You spent your entire life in the diaspora. Judging by all the accomplishments that you've achieved, the education and history and all that, it seems like, your parents and grandparents has left Palestine. They were forced out of Palestine, but Palestine never left you. But talking about the Zionist influence in Palestine, you know, it feels that the Zionism has created these kind of different realities for Palestinians as they went in and colonized the Holy Land. So, from your perspective as a Palestinian in the diaspora, can you speak to us about those, you know, different realities? Too close?
It's giving a lot of reverberation all the way through the room.
Yeah,
There's quite a few people.
Cool. No,
It's a beautiful voice, but it's too close to the microphone.
thank you.
Same with
I mean,
everybody,
thank
just a
you.
little bit away.
So, could you tell us about, is that okay? Could you tell us about those different realities from your own vantage point? Briefly, if you may.
We were named after Beit Rima. Most Palestinians are named after where they are from. So there is a small village near Ramallah called Beit Rima, hence the name, Rimawi. My father is from Beit Rima, but he was born in the 48 areas. So we became refugees in our own land in 1948 because we have no property. Where my father was born, we were driven out in 1948, just like 900,000 Palestinians out of the 1.6 million Palestinians. My mother family are from Safad, the furthest Palestinian city to the north of Palestine, and they fled on foot to Lebanon and then ended up in Syria. But to understand the realities, we need to highlight a significant and often untold or underrepresented point of view, which is that the Palestinian suffering defies time and space. To understand the impact of this on time, the first dimension, time, think of one family, first, second, third, fourth generation Palestinian Nakba survivors. And think of what they went through, one family, what they went through since 1948 and even maybe earlier than that. Think of a family that were driven out from Jaffa and ended up in Gaza. You are from Gaza, Ahmed. Most of Gaza are refugees. And then in 1956, when Israel was 8 years old, Israel decided to join Britain and France in the 1956 Suez Canal crisis and bombarded Egypt, and Gaza was under the custodianship of Egypt. So the same family, they were made refugees in 48, and Israel came back again and hit them in 1956. And then Israel came again in 1967 and occupied the whole of Gaza, and the whole of West Bank, and the whole of Jerusalem, and the whole of Sinai Desert, and the whole of Golan Heights. Same family. And then the aftermath of 1973 war. And then in 1987, what happened in 1987? The beginning of the first Intifada, where the defense minister in Israel, Isaac Rabin, who won Nobel Peace Prize, introduced the bone-breaking policy to crush the determination of Palestinians in First Intifada. There is a footage by Italian journalist that recorded 35 minutes of bone-breaking of Palestinians in August 1988. Bone-breaking as a deliberate policy to crush the determination of Palestinians in the First Intifada. Same family. And then think of what they went through in the Second Intifada. According to IDF archives, Israel fired 1 million bullets on the first day of the Second Intifada against Palestinians. 1 million bullets were fired on the first day of the Second Intifada in September year 2000. And then Israel came back again to the same family, maybe now second generation, third generation, in waves of violence. And then they put the whole of Gaza under tightened siege. And then they reminded us every second year with their military muscles in 2008, in 2012, in 2014. So this is in one random Palestinian refugee family in Gaza. This is how the suffering defies time. And to understand how it defies space, think of the population of all Palestinians worldwide. We are 14.8 million today, as we speak. And now that I'm married, so there will be 14.8 and 1, inshallah. And that will contribute to the demographic warfare with Israel. Now, these 14 million Palestinians, they, according to where they are geographically, they live in a completely different reality compared to other Palestinians. The reality in Gaza, we spoke about it. It affects 2.2 million. And there is a reality of direct military occupation against the Palestinians in West Bank, which affect 3.8 million. And which means that there is military raids, there is tanks, and there is violence from soldiers and settlers and separation wall and checkpoints, and the list goes on and on. It's one of the most brutal forms of occupation in contemporary history. And there's a third reality in Jerusalem, not similar. So the life of Palestinian in Jerusalem is not similar to the life of Palestinian in Ramallah. Because what Israel wants to achieve out of West Bank is not the same. Out of West Bank, they want to deny us a state. They want to continue looting our natural resources, especially water. They want to continue and maintain the occupation, and they want to maintain the fact that they changed it into a laboratory for their weapons and their technology. And they want to turn our population into cheap labor in 48 areas and implant settlers. But in Jerusalem, it's different. They want annexation. They want less Arabs, more Jews. And that's the third reality. Fourth reality in 48 areas, and maybe Reem can tell us more about the 48 areas. And it's the reality that it affects nearly 2 million Palestinians who, mind you, are citizens of Israel, but they live as fifth-class citizens after European Jews and Eastern Jews and Russian Jews and African Jews, and then come us, the Arabs, and then whether or not you serve in the army, then you are better off those who don't serve in the army. And then the fifth reality affects the rest of us, the refugees. They made us refugees and call us absentees, and they deny us return until today. And there is one sixth reality that all of the Palestinians get to see each other. That's the reality affecting the prisoners, al-Asra. We get to see each other behind bars. Somebody from Ramallah or Gaza or Al-Quds or 48 areas will see their fellow brothers, Palestinians, but in another reality. Shukran.
Thanks, Yusuf, for the really incredible insight. You know, that surreal situation that the Palestinians, with their own all different communities around historic Palestine and the diaspora. I want to go to you now, Nakhshon, if I may. You were born in so-called Israel, in a conservative kind of Zionist family. You served as an officer in the Israeli army. You probably have been deeply entrenched in, the struggle that the Palestinians are facing at the moment. You were probably deployed around Gaza in the West Bank and all these areas. How does someone like you, who grew up in Israel, who absorbed all that Zionist narrative, how does someone and served in the army, how does someone like you end up in an activist in Free Palestine Melbourne?
Yes, so I'll tell my short history. I was born and raised in a very Zionist family, religious Zionist family, the type of families that later on, not my family, but this type of people that went to settle the West Bank after 67. But like every child in Israel, I was from infancy learned that this is the land of Israel, this is our land. There are other people here, Arabs, we didn't even call them Palestinians, and we're surrounded with Arabs around us. All of them hate us, and we have to defend ourselves. This is what I learned. In the day-to-day life, we didn't even meet Palestinians. So we only saw them when they came as the builders or other lower-waged laborers. So no other way, there's no interaction. So they only lived in our edges of our conscience. Naturally, I wanted to be a hero and defend my country, so I wanted to go to the army and be a combatant, and that's what I did. As you said, I was even officer. I served all around in the Golan Heights, in Lebanon, and a long time not that long in Gaza, but in the West Bank. So yeah, in the days I just humiliated people in the checkpoints, in the streets, in the shops. In the nights I terrorized women and children in the houses. And the way I was indoctrinated was like, well, we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. So either these people are terrorists or they're gonna be terrorists. That's what I knew. Sorry. I didn't know anything else. I couldn't know anything else. And yeah, I was part of the oppression of Palestinians. And it was only, so it was along the first Intifada. So no real weapons, only stones and strikes and rallies or waving a Palestinian flag on the roof. So the only thing we did was just to keep them on their knees so they won't dare to any kind of uprising. That's what I did. Now, only very later on in my life, I started to doubt my knowledge and the info that I grew up into. And yeah, I learned in a very long journey, I unlearned myself everything I knew, and I learned the truth, the real reality in Palestine, the real history and real reality in Palestine. I learned that what happened in Palestine is very similar to what happened in other places around the world, like the US, like Canada, like here. People from Europe came and wanted this land for themselves on the expense of the indigenous people of the same country. And well, the definition of it is settler colonialism. And like all these places, it involved brutal ethnic cleansing. That's what happened there. So, my grandparents came from Poland in the 30s, Poland and Lithuania, and they escaped anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe and persecution, and rightly so, they sought refuge. But yeah, as Yusuf said, they didn't come to merge into the society in Palestine. They came to create a Jewish state. And it's impossible to create a Jewish state when you are less than 10% of the population. So what can you do? You have to expel the population. And that was their language from the beginning of Zionism. The first Zionist leaders, that's what they called it transfer, but that was their thoughts all along. And before the last British soldier left Palestine, they executed it. And this is the Nakba, this is the ethnic cleansing war of 1948, in which I think 85% of the population were expelled. Hundreds of villages were demolished to dust, so they won't have any place to come back for. And just the Zionists just took over everything. They just took to themselves all the land and the properties of the Palestinians. That's how they created the Jewish state. So this reality has continued ever since, because if you want to keep the state Jewish, you have to constantly maintain an apartheid regime and keep the ethnic cleansing all the time. So the horrific genocide in Gaza now is just another chapter of the same reality. It's nothing new. This is what I learned, and this is that's what I'm now fighting for. Yep.
You spoke about indoctrination. You spoke about indoctrination, we've been talking about Zionism as a political settler colonial ideology, and this brainwashing machine. You just narrated the history of Nakba. I bet you didn't know about it when you lived inside Israel. So, this racist supremacist ideology that we're speaking about in the Israeli society, what do you think needs to happen in the Israeli society to kind of prepare it to accept a resolution, like everyone is calling for peace? I don't know what that means anymore. But what do you think, is required for that society to actually accept a peaceful solution?
Well, there are around 15 million people in between the river and the sea. And roughly half of them indigenous Palestinian, half of them Jews. Now all will have eventually to live there together, and all deserve a life of dignity and peaceful and full rights. This is my vision for the future of Palestine. That's what should happen. Now, how do you get there? Unfortunately, the history shows us that no supreme group will relinquish its privileges and advantages that they receive from their own supremacy. Look at South Africa. On a more personal level, I have literally hundreds of hours of talking to my fellow or friends Zionists or not my friends Zionists. Most of them call themselves leftist. And I try to convince them. It doesn't work because it looks like a logical or rational conversation, but it's not. That's not their limitation. It's a psychological thing for them. They will not move. Because Zionism is a cult, they're all addicted. And like every addiction or cult, it involves a lot of denial. So they all live in their own rabbit hole of reality. So whatever I tell them, facts and evidence, or Ilan Papp's books, which is an Israeli historian, or there are other Israeli historians which review the whole history, it doesn't help. The barrier is psychological barrier. Therefore, I don't expect any change to come from within the Israeli society. So again, like in South Africa, it's not that the white people woke up one day and said, oh, how horrible we are, how unhumane we are, let's give all the people here the rights and let's make it a real democracy. It doesn't work this way. So the same will have to happen here. The world will have to exert sanctions on Israel and force them to dismantle this apartheid regime. It will not come from within the Israeli society, and that's what we should all aim for.
Thanks, Nachshon. As a first step, I totally agree with you. The dismantlement of this system of apartheid. But again, the ideology, this system of indoctrination as well needs to be addressed. But I'll come back to that with you, Nachshon. Reem, the Palestine is the Holy Land. Just picking up the thread from Yusuf. It is holy for Christians, for Muslims, for Jews. It's Nazareth is the place where Jesus Christ was born, but the world seems to have forgotten about the Christian community in Palestine. All these followers of Jesus Christ around the world, they still view the violence in Palestine as, you know, so-called conflict between Palestinians and Arab, or, you know, worse yet, Jews and Muslims. So I want to ask you this, like, how does the existence of Christian Palestinian communities inside of Israel, especially, you know, help combat that kind of narrative, because they are also part of that system of erasure that Israel is imposing on the Palestinians inside 1948 and West Bank and Gaza as well. So how does, you know, the presence, the existence, and the voices of Christian Palestinians challenge that, you know, overwhelmingly dominant narrative in the West?
That's a very good question. Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you. First of all, I'd like to call ourselves the Palestinian Christians, not Christian Palestinians, and there is a reason behind that. When you walk in the Holy Land, in Palestine, from the river to the sea, it is truly holy, to your point. It is a holy land. When you're walking in the streets of the old streets of Nazareth, when you're walking in the old streets of Jerusalem, which, as you know, is the Arab quarters, they are the Palestinian quarters, it is nothing but holy. So the Christian narrative for Palestinians is absolutely critical. And there's a reason why our voice is being silenced, because it is so critical. The narrative that you're seeing today in the media, we are an inconvenient truth. We really are. If it was up to the state of Israel, within the 48 territories, we shouldn't be existing. And I'm sure that Ben Gurion right now is turning in his grave saying, why did we let and allow the 150,000 Palestinians stay after 1948, who now are 2.5 million? Why? Because if there's one thing we've been blessed with, like even if you are a Palestinian Jew, Palestinian Christian, Palestinian Muslim, we are fertile. We are fertile. We have been blessed. We are from the Holy Land. So if I can just go back a minute, I was born in Turkey and I was born in Haifa. My immediate family from both sides, so that's my mum's family and my father's family, were part of the small group of 150,000 Palestinians that never left. But what does that mean? Because prior to 1948, it was Palestine. There were Palestinian Christians. Let me just start. Palestinian Jews, Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Muslims, in that order. Whether it was conversion, reversion, whatever it may be, I respect every single person's faith. But we were all Palestinian and we all did live side by side. It's not a story, though. It's not a romanticised story. And one of the very unique things about Palestine, so in other places in the Middle East, you can go to places and you'll have, like for example in Lebanon, there is a whole town that's only Christians, or there's a whole town that's only Muslims. In Palestine, uniquely, it's not like that. And for the exact reason that you said, when Islam came to Palestine, there was an immediate order not to touch any of the holy places, not to touch the residents, to respect the faith. And so whether, for us as Palestinian Christians, we are the direct descendants of Jesus Christ. The direct descendants. We didn't immigrate to Palestine. If anything, the Palestinians exported one of the most important, monumental things to the world. No one has exported anything, and this young man's name was Jesus Christ. We exported it to the rest of the world. And I think one thing that's really forgotten is that whether you're a Palestinian Jew, a Palestinian Christian, or a Palestinian Muslim, you are a direct descendant of Jesus Christ. Let that just sit with you for a little bit. So anyone who denies the rights of a Palestinian, you're denying the rights of the indigenous Jew, you're denying the rights of the indigenous Christian, and you're denying the rights of the indigenous Muslim of Palestine. And that's where the narrative is broken. For me, from both my sides, my father and mother were born during the Nakba. My mother comes from a family of 10 siblings. And my dad, he had 3 brothers, or 2, they're 3 brothers altogether, and his extended family as well, all in Haifa. From my mum's side, in 1948, my grandfather from my mum's side looked at his wife, my grandmother, and said, what are we going to do? We can't just go and flee. We've got young kids. My mum was 6 years old, and the youngest was 5 years old, and the eldest was 30 years old, with kids of his own. And they were all living in Haifa, in what's called the Hadar right now, in a house together. So they decided not to leave, and they did flee Haifa from both sides. My father's side fled further up north to a village where the Druze were living, and they protected them. And my mother's family, they fled to the mountains and had to live under the olive trees for 3 months before they can go back to Kufr Yassif, which is a small village next to Haifa. Then a year after the Nakba, they all returned to Haifa. They went back. Now, this is the difference. They never left the country. When they came back, their home in the Hadar was already occupied by another family from Europe. Was already occupied, and they never ever got it back. So my grandmother held the key to her home. And unfortunately, she did die with a broken heart, and she was buried with that key. But again, from us, when we walk down the streets of Haifa and Nazareth, and you said that Jesus Christ, he was conceived in Nazareth. He was literally conceived in Nazareth. But we do not differentiate. So my life, when I was living in Haifa, during, I don't know who would remember Sabra al-Shatila, the massacre of Palestinians in Lebanon in 1982, it would have been. I was 12 years old at the time. And as Palestinians, we went from the church and marched from the church to the mosque. Our sheikh and our khuri, so our priest, were hand in hand, arm in arm, and they led the whole procession. Now, I understand what you were going through at the time as well, because the police were also there, and we were beaten. Because how dare we rally against a massacre where 3,000 people were killed, if I've got the figures right. So back to your answer in terms of, is it an important narrative? Of course it's an important narrative, because here we have in the West people, I mean, we're going through Lent right now. Lent. Let's think a little bit about Lent, where Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to reflect. He fasted. He was tempted. But he was preparing himself to come back out for the ultimate sacrifice. And we seem to forget that. So why are we in the churches here in the West not understanding what Jesus' word was? Why are we changing that narrative right now? How can we change history? How can we change our faith? And they go, oh yeah, but it's a bit different, isn't it? These are Palestinian Muslims. Because that's basically what we're saying. We're going, because they are Muslims, it's okay. The Palestinian has been dehumanized so much to a point where it's okay to massacre. Regardless to whether, and by the way, they're Christian, they're Muslims, Palestinian, and those Jews who are currently supporting within the state are not having an easy time either. But how are we? Where are the churches to speak up against this? And I, as a Christian, as a Palestinian Christian, I can say this. And that's where our narrative is really important, because we challenge that narrative. What did Jesus teach us? Did Jesus at any stage say, it's okay, you are a Jew, you're okay, you can live? Did he at any point in time say, no, you're a Muslim, so you've got to die? He never once said that. And every single faith, and we go, is this a religious war? And truthfully, you said it beautifully. If this was about religion, there would be love. There would be unity. There would be oneness. We would go back to where it was before 1948. We wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing today, the horrendous criminal genocidal activities that are taking place, not just in Gaza, in the West Bank as well.
Thank you for telling us this powerful story and, going through the history and reminding us what this is all about, or what this is all not about. But I want to zoom in on your own experience, growing up in Palestine in 1948. You mentioned you were the minorities, all of a sudden you were the owners of the land, and all of a sudden you've been transformed into this smaller group living under the state that has colonized, brutalized, committed a Nakba and massacres. How did growing up inside the 1948 Palestine, how did it shape up your identity and understanding of this kind of discrimination as well that you've experienced, highly likely?
Yeah, another very good question. And please understand that every single Palestinian that you talk to right now, it doesn't matter where they are in the globe, they are feeling the pain. They are feeling the pain. And so when you ask a Palestinian, how are you? I don't think any of us actually know how to answer that question. And for me, I go, yeah, I'm okay. Or yeah, I'm good. But for me, in terms of living in the 1948 territories, we knew it was our land. Can I just preface that? Every single Palestinian, it doesn't matter whether you're allowed to call yourself a Palestinian or you're not allowed to call yourself a Palestinian, we know we're Palestinian, we know where our roots are. We know how sacred the land is, and we know that we belong to the land. That's number one. So no one can kill that. Again, Ben-Gurion would be very upset that he didn't get rid of that 150, because there's resilience is beyond what anyone can explain. But especially now what's going on in Gaza with the genocide, because it's televised. My mother is 84 years old, and so she lived through the Nakba. When we used to read about 530 villages and towns were demolished, it's very easy to intellectualize that sort of thing until you see what's happening today. Because it's not just that 530 villages were demolished, people were massacred. When we talk about demolish, it means what's happening now was happening then. It means to this day there's still mass graves. There's still mass graves that have not been unearthed. So it didn't start in 48 and then stop, but it didn't start on October 7th and then it started, just after on October 8th, 2023. It is being ongoing. But for us, there is a beautiful side to it as well. When you're indigenous to the land, and when there's resilience, there is something about us that will always stand up to the occupiers. Our resistance comes in the form of 150,000 has become 2.5 million. Times as harder as anyone else. There's a little town called Arabi in the 48 territories. You know that there's more Palestinian doctors per capita in Arabi than anywhere else in the world. And the vast majority of people, thank you. Well, like the article says Arabi, but we can have a look at it.
Yeah, we're my neighbors.
Only because it's referenced in my book and the article comes. But maybe there's a second town, because it wouldn't surprise me. Maybe it's overtaken that town, because that was 3 years ago when I started writing that book. So thank you, and I'll look it up. I mean, you're probably right. But the point of this is that, and I'm sorry, I forgot even where I was going with it, but despite, no, that's okay, please, thank you. Despite it. Because here's what I do know. Yes, we do have a lot of doctors, nurses, engineers, and so forth. The discrimination under 1948 against the Palestinian, that they call Arab-Israeli, is like nothing else. It's not first-class citizen, it's not second-class citizen, it is fifth and sixth-class citizenship. The vast majority of our youngsters have to go overseas to get their education. Did you know they talk about democracy, this democracy? Well, there's a quota as to how many supposed Arab Israelis are allowed to go into medicine in the universities in the 48 territories. Did you know that? So even if you're 100 times better as a Palestinian than your average Israeli Jew, you still have to go overseas to get an education, and then you come back. So it's despite the system, not because of the system. How does it feel to live in 48? So for example, when I go into Tel Aviv, do you still have your citizenship? Okay, so we still have citizenships. Here in Australia, you and I are equal. We are allowed to disagree, but we are truly under the law equal. The second I step foot in Tel Aviv, the second he steps foot in Tel Aviv, we are no longer equal. That's your so-called democracy. How does it feel? And it is because a lot of people, there is a misconception around, well, it's so easy for the 48ers, so easy. But if you were to ask someone from 1948, and by the way, right now my family don't talk to me openly because they're scared of everything, but if you were to ask them, how are you feeling? There's only one word that they use, and that's in Arabic, it's makhnu'in.
Suffocated.
We are suffocated. So imagine me being born in the 1948 territories, where my grandmother was born, where my grandmother was born, where my great-great-grandmother was born, where my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was born. And you would have heard of that little town of Nazareth. That's the area that I'm from. So again, we're not imports. Palestinian Christians didn't come and immigrate from anywhere. We have been part of that land forever and a day. So imagine I sit next to this gentleman on a bus, and he has a big rifle, because that's what happens. Or he's at university and he's got the gun, and I'm going to university, or I'm just walking down the street and we're on the beach, and I'm trying to enjoy my day on the beach with my family, and a soldier comes by and they have a big gun, not a machine gun, but it's a big gun. How do you think we're going to feel? But what we do is we don't say anything, and we are survivors. And the best thing that can happen to Palestine is to have those 2.5 million Palestinians who are able to buy land, who are so entrepreneurial that they have businesses to a point where the Jewish community needs us more than we need them. On Saturday morning, Wad al-Nisnas in Haifa, that's the Arab quarters, the Palestinian quarters. Who do you think is coming to our markets to buy our hummus, to buy our food, to get involved with the culture? So there is resilience. The resilience is astronomical.
Thank you. I do want to come back to that point, you know, this image of the state of Israel being, you know, equality, freedom, democracy, and so on. I do want to zoom in on that with you, but first I want to go back to Yusuf. Reem has told briefly her story so beautifully, and there are more than, to my readings, 6 million refugees worldwide in the world, 6 million Palestinian refugees, I must say. And many of those, you know, Nakba survivors have told us their stories and have told their offsprings and younger generations their stories, and they still remember, still have the keys and so on and so forth. So how important storytelling is for Palestinians? You know, what can it offer us, especially at these dark times that we're kind of going through with the genocide unfolding?
Since we started documenting history, civilizations responded to hard time with satire and storytelling and comedy, black humor, and theater, and singing, and dancing, and poetry, and different forms of art. And this is not to celebrate the hard time. Hard time could be a natural disaster, like in Iraq, for example, the two rivers can just, the flood and natural disaster, or could be warfare. The civilization respond to dark time with storytelling. And today, the more we rationalize with our reality, let's put Palestine aside, mankind on this planet, we see imminent threat of a nuclear war that could destroy life on this planet. We see global warming. We see economic pressure and inflation, stagflation. And we see the danger of a collapse of a 6th century empire called the Western Empire. And then, of course, it will create a vacuum, and the vacuum might lead to chaos. The more we rationalize with this, the more we need art. There is a saying by somebody I don't know, but the quote is about poetry, and what is applicable on poetry is applicable on visual arts and music and other forms of art. And it says, poetry heals the wounds inflicted by reason. Poetry heals the wounds inflicted by reason. And if you want to understand the role of storytelling in the Palestinian context, you just need to take examples of songs that accompanied the Palestinian struggle for justice and freedom. One of the earliest songs we have is Yamma Mwayli al-Hawa, Yamma Mwayliya, Darb al-Khanajir wala Hukm al-Nadhil fiyya. I would rather be stabbed by daggers than ruled by villains. I would rather be stabbed by daggers than ruled by villains. That's a song which started being popular in Palestine in the early 20s. And in 1929, there was a grand revolution in Palestine because of the provocation of Muslim worshippers in the Al-Aqsa compound. The revolution is called Al-Buraq Revolution. Al-Buraq today is called the Wailing Wall. It's Al-Buraq Wall in the Muslim Al-Aqsa compound. And that revolution was led by intellectuals and peasants and traders, and of course it was crushed by the British mandate, and then they managed to capture the leaders of the revolution. 3 leaders, one from Safad, one from Yafa, one from Hebron al-Khalil, Fuad Hijazi, Ata Zir, Muhammad Jamjoom. And they were imprisoned in the prison of Akka, and Britain decided to execute them. And they executed them on a Tuesday. And there was a Palestinian storyteller, Nuh Ibrahim, wrote من سجن عكا وطلعت جنازي محمد جمجوم وفؤاد حجازي جازي عليهم يا شعبي جازي المندوب السامي وربعه عمومة. And he composed it, and it became a song. And in the 70s, Al-Ashiqeen band immortalized it and played it in Syria. And now we, all Palestinians, sing from the Akka prison because of that. In 1936, during the peak of the Grand Revolution against British mandate and against the European resettlement in Palestine, where there was 6 months of strikes that paralyzed the British mandate in Palestine, the Palestinians found in a poem written by a teacher a good representative of their slogan. That teacher was Ibrahim Touqan, who happened to be a good poet, who gave us Mawtani. Mawtani. You may have heard or know Mawtani, the song, Al-Jalal. And the lyrics became the pseudo-national anthem of the Palestinian strike and movement. And it was picked by composers from Lebanon. Lebanese composers made it a song because it became a voice of pan-Arabism back then. And then the 2 brothers, Muhammad and Ahmad Flayfel, made this poem into a song, and then it became the song of the chanting of Arabhood in the 50s and 60s, and it became the pseudo-national anthem of Palestine until 1971, when PLO introduced Fida'i, because Mawtani was not militant enough. And today, Mawtani became the national anthem of Iraq. The Iraqi anthem, the Iraqi national anthem is Mawtani. So a poem written by Palestinian in 33, composed by Lebanese in 37, chanted by all Arabs, are today's national anthem of Iraq. And that is the power of story, and that is the power of poetry. Maybe we can add more later, but I will leave it here.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you very much. And probably many will have questions about this particular point, but it's important to emphasize the powerfulness or the power of storytelling for the Palestinian life. I want to go, and I'm conscious of time. I know you guys are eager to kind of ask your questions, but lastly, I want to go to Nakhshan. One question, if you could be brief as well, and for Reem. So, Nakhshan, you hate to be referred to as an ex-IOF officer, but then yet, when I asked you for your bio, you actually included that in the bio. So I've got a question for you. How does having been inside this system of oppression and being a participant in that oppression, in that system, and having this dark history, how did that shape up your understanding of the Zionist state, once you came out and looked at it from outside? And I just want to make it more difficult for you as well. When you provided me with your bio, you also mentioned that ex-IOF officer. What are you trying to signal there? Are you trying to say that, yes, it is possible to kind of de-Zionize, as it were? I know these are a lot of questions, but if you could be brief, would be very, very great.
Okay, I'll try to be brief.
Good luck.
Being the oppressor, being part of the apartheid and getting out of it, this awakening, that made me, doesn't change my understanding, because I understand exactly like you, or like everyone here, who is familiar with the reality on the ground. But it made a numerous obligation of me to join the struggle because of what I've been. And yeah, I don't know if it's a regret or yeah, it is.
So it kind of gave you more drive.
Yeah, yes, I am committed to this struggle until I die. Probably. I don't want to analyze myself. It's a guilt. I can't psychologically analyze myself, but this is what it is. I can't live it. My advantage in this position is that no one can tell me. I mean, neither Albanese nor Penny Wong or any other politician or Zionist leader here can tell me, no, it's wrong. Nah, it's complex. It is. You can't say apartheid. No, you don't tell me what it is, because I was there. I did it in my own hand with my own soldiers on the ground. So no one can tell me. And this is an advantage to my opinion. And I'm not trying to convert the Zionist anywhere. Not the Zionist in Australia. It's the Jewish community is very Zionist, even compared to other Jewish communities around the world. But surprisingly, I recently realized that there are people in this community that were 2 years ago were Zionists and they are converting now, which it doesn't happen in Israel at the moment at all. But still, my focus is to the general public in Australia, because they're not Zionists, but they are pro-Zionist, because they fed by the media here, which is very pro-Zionist, very biased toward Israel, but they're not invested in Zionism. So I can talk to them, and again, my strength, and it sadly, if what Ahmed said or Yusuf or Reem, if we'll stand on the same ground and say the same thing in fact, which you are telling for 100 years and I just recently learned, I will be more believed than you because of where I come from. And it's sad and it's infuriating, but it is what it is. When I have, in the last 2 years or the last 1 year and a half, people told me you open our eyes because of what you're saying. So I have to take advantage on and this is not because I'm clever or articulated, it's because of where I come from, and because my reality and my history. So I have to take advantage on this position of mine and use it. But the aim is to the public in Australia, not the Zionist. It will be hard. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. I know you guys must have a lot of questions to follow up to Nakshon as well on this, so please be prepared. We're going to start soon. But before we start the Q&A, I really want to hone in on something that you mentioned, Reem, the discrimination, between Palestinians and, the Jewish citizens of Israel. Israel claims to be, the beacon of freedom and justice, the only democracy in the Middle East. But yet we've seen Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, even B'Tselem, an Israeli NGO, came out calling Israel an apartheid state. So something must be wrong there. I mean, could you, from your own perspective, could you, point out to us what is wrong? Like, how is Israel an apartheid state?
Well, thank you. First of all, there are about 65 laws, directly or indirectly, that discriminate against Palestinians. That's number one. So by law, there's discrimination. And then there's the cultural discrimination. Then there's there's the day-to-day sort of events of discrimination. Even on your RID cards, you will know who the Muslim Christian is by the numbers. So Natsrit for example, is a Christian. So they'll know what we are. And by the number on the ID, you'll know that we are Christian. When you enter the airport, the reason why they ask you, for example, what's your father's name, is so that they know whether you are Muslim, Christian, Jewish. They've got their little mechashev, their little computer thing on their hands, and they can work it out pretty much straight away. So, for example, my father's name is Butros. Butros meaning Peter. Peter meaning the rock, the first church, the apostle. Immediately they would know, am I a Palestinian Christian or am I a Palestinian Muslim? But even within let's look at 48 territories, where it's meant to be a real democracy. Our schools are funded differently. So Jewish schools get funded differently to the supposed Arab schools. We're also not allowed to learn our own history. I don't know if anyone recognises that. The 1948 Nakba is not taught in history, and we're not allowed to talk about it. Apparently it never happened, because what we did do in 1948, apparently, is we very kindly got up off our lounges, we left the stoves on, okay, and the eggs boiling. We picked up our bags, if we had bags, and we just said, here you go, you can have it now because it's yours. And we walked away from everything. That is the truth. Truly, there's a belief that that's what happened. There's a belief that, the Arab countries said, flee now and leave now. This is not your country, or leave. And that's what we did. That's not the story. But we're not allowed to learn that history. And speaking of stories, when you're talking storytelling and poetry, our revolutionaries were the poets and the storytellers. Why? Because if we don't write it down and if we don't tell it through song, it's going to be erased. Because we're not allowed to teach it in our own schools. Even in the 48 territories, I'll tell you a little story. My brother was in year 7. We were in Haifa at school, Carmelite, Madrasa al-Carmelite, so it's the Carmelite nuns. And all of a sudden, one day, my mum gets a phone call. It's an urgent phone call from the headmistress. Afaf, you better come down here now. Like now, urgent. Not you can come down and see us tomorrow at 12 o'clock, now. So my mum leaves Nazareth. She's the education officer and working in Nazareth for all the visually impaired Palestinians within the 48 territories. So she leaves her post to go back to Haifa, to go back to the headmistress office, and they sat her down. They said, we have a really important thing that we have to discuss with you. Usually when that happens here in Australia, you go, who's he hit? Who did he swear at? And what fight has he been in? But no, for my brother, it was this. He was caught in class drawing the Palestinian flag, so doodling basically, on the front cover of his book. And that demanded immediate attention because they were all too scared. Because what if we get caught? Something as simple as that. My memories as a child is because every single Palestinian, doesn't matter if you're from the 48 territories, from West Bank, from Gaza, has got relatives in the Israeli prisons. And we are all known, they are known, not me, I wasn't in prison, but we are known as Palestinian prisoners, political prisoners. Not Palestinian, just political prisoners. My uncle was imprisoned for life in the lead prison. And you are right, that's the only time that we are allowed to meet our brothers and sisters. Because from the 48 territories, I'm not allowed to see anyone from Lebanon, I'm not allowed to see anyone from, like West Bank, it's even hard to go to West Bank. To go to West Bank, we used to have the kafiyeh and put it in the front of our car so we can tell the Palestinians from West Bank, it's okay, we're Palestinians from Haifa. That was our code, until, of course, you're going through checkpoints and you get into trouble for having the kafiyeh in the first place. But my memories were going to, on weekends, we would go to the lead to visit my uncles in prison. And the only reason why he came out, because he was in prison for life after 17 years, was because there was a prisoner exchange program. And generally speaking, with Palestinians from the 48 territories, they're expelled outside of the 48 territories. But he wasn't expelled because during that 17 years, he lost both his legs to gangrene. Because life in prison for a Palestinian is no walk in the park. You do not go into prison and come out unscathed one way or another. And that's what happened to a lot of our uncles. Now, my 83-year-old mother, and I do have to mention this, my 83-year-old mother who's here in Australia now, the second youngest of 10, 5 brothers. When she watched what's happening in Gaza, in the first 3-4 weeks, she lost about 6 kilos. The reason why was because all the memories came flooding back as a 6-7-year-old. Do you remember the image of the men that were stripped to their underwear? She started to cry. Why did she start to cry? Because she said, Reem, that's what they did to my brothers. My brothers all came back and they had been stripped down. And my mother and my sisters, we were all crying for seeing how they brutally treated her brothers. And my grandfather at the time said to his wife and his daughters, stop crying. At least they've come back. So you tell me what kind of democracy was that? Between 1948 and 1967, they were living under martial law. And then they were afforded an Arab-Israeli citizenship. After 1969, I think, 67, 69? 66? Now, I was born, I was born 2 years after that, in 1969. At the time, though, in our apartment block on Mount Carmel, we still did have Palestinian Jews, Christians, Muslims living in the same apartment block. If you are to go there now, to the same apartment block, this is what's happening. What they classify as Arab Israelis now, because they're having lots of babies, they're moving upwards in Mount Carmel. But that means the Jews are also moving upwards. Where we used to have all of us living together, now it's more and more segregated. Because it's getting tougher and tougher. And I think you mentioned you were in Haifa a few weeks ago.
Show you photos.
How would I enjoy it in Haifa right now?
If you don't put kafir on yourself, it'll be okay.
Yes, because right now I don't wear a cross. So they can't tell whether I'm a Jew, Christian, or Muslim until I get my ID out. Then they'll be able to. I mean, what kind of democracy is that? I'm only scraping the barrel. I'll give you one last example. Last time I went back home, we're in Haifa at the El Palm. So it's a beautiful shopping centre. We're sitting at a cafe. I'm with my cousins. We're enjoying ourselves. And all of a sudden I turned around and there was a sign on the restaurant window, workers wanted. Military experience mandatory.
What does that mean?
No Arabs.
Why do you need military experience to be a waitress?
In my local cafe, I understand in my local cafe why.
Yes, well, we know why, but this is the sort of treatment. What kind of democracy is this?
Thanks, Reem, for this amazing insight. I really do encourage everyone to, one, prepare your questions, and two, have a look at the books at the table. Reem's book, From the River to the Sea, Humanizing Freedom. It's a great read. I have a copy. I have been told that I can only accept 2 questions. It's probably my fault. I was enjoying the conversation with the panelists. I don't know about you, but so we're gonna go 1, 2. That's the only hand. 3 hands. I think I saw 3 hands. So let's go 1, 2, and 3. The gentleman at the back in the suit, and then the gentleman here in the white shirt who's playing with his phone right now, and the gentleman in the black jacket. Yes, please.
We're left with the next question. What is a realistic goal having regard to the Middle East as it presently stands? Is it a unitary state, not called Israel? Is it a situation as it is looking for a global solution? What is the realistic solution?
if you heard the question, what is a realistic solution? That's the $63,000 question, I think. Two-state, one-state, federal state, along those lines, personal answers. So I really do want to encourage the panelists. I'm going to be greedy now with my time. A couple of minutes would be great. Reem, let's start again.
Right now, the solution itself is not as important, and I'll tell you why. There has to be a willingness to have peace with justice. Peace is not easy. Having warfare is so easy, you can see it. Hatred is easy, division is easy, all of that is easy. Now, once we get to know each other, the system does have to change, by the way. But here we are in Australia. I can guarantee you right now, there's no two people in this room that will agree 100% on every single little thing. But we have a system of respect, we have a system of equality. For the most part. But it's better than what there is over there, correct? We're talking about pragmatism here. In terms of what is the solution, there's really two kinds of solutions. You can keep doing what we're doing, and you're not going to get rid of 7 million Palestinians, and we're not going to get rid of 7 million Jews from either side. This is the reality of it. If anyone thinks that there's 15 million people on this land. If anyone thinks that they're going to get rid of one or the other, Israel has failed miserably since 1948 to get rid of a people without an army. We need to understand that. But at the same time, and 30 more seconds, at the same time, as the indigenous people of the land, we are peace-loving. We know that we would not do the same thing to anyone else, and we do have to cut the chain. There is a lot of pain within Palestinians right now, and it is really hard for a lot of them to understand, well, how do you trust an Israeli Jew ever again? How do you trust a Zionist? And I understand that, because right now there is a genocide going on. But as someone who's lived in the 48 territories and who has lived alongside Jews and who has seen firsthand the pain of realising what has been done and that there is a possibility, I know that the other side of it will look very different than what it does look like right now. It just needs people to speak up. It needs people like you and I and everyone to keep talking about this and to keep demanding equality, justice on equal terms from the river to the sea, with equal rights for every single Palestinian, no matter where they are in the globe, to have the right of return.
So I second what Reem had powerfully said, but I want to talk as an observer of what the Palestinians express these days as we speak. We have witnessed a new level of brokenness that's unprecedented, where none of the above seems to matter in terms of a solution. So many terms, so many words, so many slogans became meaningless because the failure of the implementation on ground, and because the sheer level of violence that we have witnessed in such a short period of time in a confined area in geography. So a word like solution, try and talk to a Palestinian. I'll tell you what we say when we have dinner or when we have coffee or chai. We don't talk about what the solution is, or we don't talk about whether it's one state or two state or this kind of, rightly so, this is a valid question, but to us it doesn't matter. We live in time of brokenness, and what we need, and I say this to my fellow Palestinians and my fellow Australians who support the Palestinian cause, is to take in mind how we protect the Palestinians physically and mentally and emotionally. And also we have to be in solidarity with each other. We have to be kind to each other. Especially we live in time of division and in time of polarization internally. So do we catch the wave? Let's not do that. Let's be understanding to each other, let's be kind to each other, and let's try and protect our minds and souls and hearts because it is about to fall apart.
Thank you. You want to talk about that one? Same sentiment from Sean. I want to go to the gentleman here with the white. If you just raise your voice as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I guess I also would like to see a future where everyone's living in peace and dignity, but I also just think about accountability. There's a lot of IOF soldiers who now go around the world speaking about their experiences and the things that they've done, but have they actually been held accountable for what they've done to Palestinians? And I'm not just talking about killing Palestinians, I'm talking about terrorizing Palestinians, whether it's at checkpoints or in their homes. I've read an interview where I think you spoke about, terrorizing an old couple, making them go and wipe graffiti off the wall, like that you had no idea what the graffiti said, for example. Yeah. So I just want to understand, what accountability have you faced? And also, the people that are currently committing the genocide, it is not just the government, it is the society as a whole. And I want to understand, how are they going to be held accountable for their actions, and how can Palestinians live side by side by these monsters that are actually committing the genocide?
Yeah. Got the question.
And also, I guess, just
Very quickly, yeah.
More broadly, I just want to understand, how do we get the world to see that Zionism is akin to Nazism?
Okay.
Because I think people would not be friends with Nazis, but I'm sure there's people in the room who would be happily be like, oh yeah.
Let's do that question. I think, Akshan, that question has your name on it. So accountability, if you could address the issue of accountability.
Well, I can't be judge of myself, so I thought about it because I should be accountable. I don't know. So I'm prepared to sit in jail if that will make Palestine free. Really, I'll sit 3 years in jail now if it will free Palestine. But the condition is that all these criminals there that are now slaughtering people will be in jail accordingly. So, but I'm not in the position to talk about accountability. I don't know what to say about this.
The second question, maybe Reem, did you have, or Akshan as well, comparing Zionism with Nazism?
Yeah, well, I don't know how to make it. There's a lot of, sorry to say, a lot of parallels. So ideology is the same. We are supreme. The dehumanization of the other people, it's the same like Nazism. The execution is different, so there still hopefully won't be gas chambers, but there's extermination. I should say that. I don't know how to show it the world. I'm trying to talk. I wish someone else had the answers. This is politics around the world, and that's how all the Western world, which was based on the same settler colonialism. That's its resumption with Israel, I guess, and that's why they're so reluctant to tell the truth about because they know the truth. How to force them to do this comparison? I don't know. If you have answers, I'm happy.
Yusuf, just briefly, if you may.
I will just quickly reflect on accountability. From 2008 to 2014, I provided, along with 30 other Australian volunteers, language support to Palestinian families who fled violence in Iraq and in Syria and got stuck on border camps between Iraq and Jordan and Iraq and Syria. And we helped them fill applications to come to Australia. The success rate was 10%, We applied on behalf of 450 families. We got 45 families here in Australia. And I have seen many applications. There is an application called 482, offshore humanitarian protection. And there is in this question, in this form, an Australian form for migration, a series of questions where the applicant will have to say yes or no. And there is a question about, did you serve in the army? Were you involved in an act of a crime against? And there's like specific words that all of them are applicable on Israeli soldiers who come to Australia as tourists after they were tired of killing Palestinians, so they might need a break. Melbourne might be one of them. And in terms of accountability, I want Australian soldiers to be treated equally when it comes to the processing of Australian forms, especially on tourist visas. And that is the easiest we can call for. And I don't think that they should be exempt from going through or from answering wrongly.
That's an important point. Okay, I've been told that we're finished. Sorry, Reem. I really want to thank everyone who came today, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And back to you, Helen.
We were a bit late starting, but I'm sorry to end things now. 3 wonderful speakers, and thank you to Ahmed as well. And just as we finish, I'd like to acknowledge, Mark spoke about the Sabeel organisation, the other 2 organisations which are hosting these series of forums to bring the message that you've heard tonight are PIEN, the Palestine-Israel Ecumenical Network, a nice bold banner over there, and Palestinian Christians in Australia. And come and say hello at the tables up the back. There are pamphlets to take away if you'd like to sign up to the various newsletters. There are the facilities to do that. As we partake now in our delicious refreshments, some of you may have to leave sooner rather than later, but I'd encourage you to stay. And then one extra ask, please, from some of you, may we have some help in packing away the chairs after we have shared some time together. So we have joined together in these dark times. And as we partake of this food, we think of those who go without, and we proclaim our common humanity. Once again, we thank the speakers and go in peace.